The Sacrifice, a short story in the Chronicles of Dalriya, written by Jamie Edmundson, narrated by Aaron Smith. The Sacrifice. The year 665, 7 years after the end of the Isharite Wars. "Come on then, Jesper," Herin demanded after a long silence. "I expected some criticism on my homeland by now." Not easy, Jesper had to admit. The climate was warm, the landscape lush, and for the last hour of travel, he could detect a delicate sea breeze coming in from the west. "It lacks the stark majesty of Halvia," he ventured. "Huh?" Herin responded, clearly not impressed. "Lacks the bare rock and freezing ice fields, you mean to say. Halvia can keep them." Jesper had known Herin would be quick with a retort. He glanced across at his other companion, but soon thought better of any attempt to get support from Rimmon. The mage was increasingly locked away with his own thoughts, rarely deigning to involve himself in their petty squabbles. The dirt track they followed led them to their destination, the royal settlement of Wincandon. Wooden houses appeared on either side of the track, complete with small gardens. Behind them lay the village fields. A stream tinkled its way through the settlement, with a watermill and pond. A huge hall dominated the central space. It seemed idyllic. They found their own way to the stables. No servants or guards came to intercept them. Dismounting, Jesper had to remind himself he'd come to see a king, not some local lord. Eventually a stable hand appeared. "Do you want me to see to your mounts?" she asked. "Please," said Herin, giving her a coin. Jesper whistled as they walked to the hall. "Mr. Generous, all of a sudden?" "Might as well be generous when you've got nothing left," Herin muttered. They entered the main hall. It was empty and shaded. Jesper appreciated the drop in temperature. All he needed now was a drink. Along with Herin and Rimmon, he looked about the place, wondering where the royal family and their entourage might be. The long walls of the hall had stairs leading up to the next floor, from where a figure descended towards them. Sandy-haired, he wore simple linen leggings and shirt. Jesper therefore got a shock when Herin addressed him. "Your Majesty," he said, tilting his head forward. Jesper made a clumsy attempt at a bow. King Edgar stopped halfway down. "Come up," he said with a gesture, turning around and retracing his steps. Jesper had mixed with enough kings and lords to know that, when one got to know them, they were men just the same as everyone else. But he had never found their homes to be as casual as the King of Magnia's. Jesper and his two companions made their way up the wooden stairs to the top floor of the hall. They found themselves in a corridor, the space partitioned up into various rooms. King Edgar led them into one of them, a small table and half a dozen chairs set out for dining or meeting. Edgar grabbed a jug and poured them each a drink. He noticed Rimmon staring at him as he did so. "I'm at home, and I have no need to stand on ceremony," said the king. "Of course," said Rimmon, taking an offered cup and sipping at it. "Delicious." "Not standing on ceremony is one thing," said Herin, grabbing his drink. He waved his other hand at Edgar. "You look like you've retired." "That's Herin, rude as usual. To give him his due, though, he's equally rude to everyone, even monarchs." Jesper took his cup and drank. Wine watered down with cool water, presumably from the stream. It was divine. "This is where we go for family time," said Edgar. "Don't worry, Magnia continues to keep me busy." Jesper knew it to be true. Edgar and his queen, Elfled, had overseen the reunion of South and North Magnia into one realm again. Although Magnians had fought plenty in the Isharite Wars, Magnia itself had been untouched. Under Edgar's guidance, it had emerged as one of the most prosperous and powerful realms in Dalriya. I asked you to come to Wincandon for a reason. The king looked deadly serious now. This meeting never happened, and you were never here. Consider me intrigued, Herin said. All in good time, said Edgar. Take a seat. When you've taken refreshments, I will return with the Queen. We'll soon reveal why we asked you here. Queen Elfled was of Midian as well as Magnian heritage. Her skin was golden brown and her dark hair fell in ringlets around her face. Unlike her husband, she dressed like royalty, wearing a blue V-neck gown, trimmed with gold. In appearance, she was everything Jesper imagined a queen to be, beautiful and exotic. Her first words, therefore, came as something of a shock. We want Gervais Salvinus killed. Salvinus, said Herin, as if uttering a curse. Gervais Salvinus was a name Jesper was vaguely familiar with. A mercenary captain who had served Emeric of Borussia and been a party to his treachery. When Jesper had come to Dalriya, Emeric was already dead, his attempt to become emperor stopped by an alliance between the Magnians and Duke Cohen of Thess, the man who now wore the imperial crown. Emeric's duchy was given to a loyalist, the previous emperor's brother, Walter. Why the fate of a disgraced foreign mercenary captain should concern the rulers of Magnia was beyond him. Maybe we've done a few things that some might consider outside the law, Jesper said, but we're not assassins. Herin held up a hand to silence him. When it comes to Gervais Salvinus, we can make an exception. Why? Jesper demanded. If they were really going to kill someone in cold blood, he would need a very good reason. I have unfinished business with him, Herin said. He took me and my friends prisoner in Koldeberg. That's when Rabigar lost his eye. He tried to kill me, said King Edgar. Came into my camp one night, like the coward he is. Killed my chancellor, Eldnoth. I only survived through the sacrifice of my bodyguard, Leofwin. In Essenberg, said Elfled, Edgar and my brother helped to defend the city against the drawbacks. During the evacuation, Salvinus had his crossbowmen shoot them. People fighting on his own side, who were helping to defend Brisingia. Edgar got lucky. Kerda didn't. That crime cannot go unpunished. I see, said Jesper, chastened by the raw emotion in the room. Where is he? Asked Herin. My source informs me he is in the Empire, in Essenberg. What source? Herin demanded. Edgar paused. Farid, he said at last. That is never to be revealed. Of course, said Herin. Why have the Brisingians not punished him? Rimmon asked. Edgar sighed. That is what should have happened. I received promises from both Cohen and Walter that they would deal with Salvinus. It hasn't happened, and I have reached the point where I have no faith left in their word. It sounds like Salvinus has ingratiated himself with the Kellish ducal family, Elfled explained. The Emperor's widow, Hannelore in particular. He led her family out of Essenberg when it fell, took them to Lindhafen. As you know, her husband was killed at about the same time. The imperial crown went to Cohen. It sounds like she was scared, vulnerable, has become dependent on him. Any attempts by Cohen or Walter to remove his influence have failed. And they're not prepared to push it further. Use force? Rimmon suggested. Start a civil war over it. Exactly, said Elfled. Imperial politics has got complicated. And any influence I used to have has gone, said Edgar. Despite the blood spilt by Magnians in the Empire, that's been quickly forgotten. He looked at Elfled. So we're left with a choice. Shrug and forget about Salvinus, or do something about it. And we can't forget or forgive, so we've turned to you. If you take it on, you'll be very well rewarded. Part up front, the rest when we get confirmation he's dead. Paid to kill someone? Jesper thought. Even if that someone has blood on their hands? He really wasn't sure. A man has to have some lines he won't cross. Now, said Herin, when you say very well rewarded. I know it's dangerous, said Edgar. Do this, and I'll make you rich. You'll never have to work again, he smiled. You can retire and dress like me. Edgar, said Herin, if I'm ever so rich I can retire, I won't be dressing like you. They stayed the night at Wincandon and left in the morning. There had been no real discussion about whether they were going to take the king's mission or not. Herin was set on it. If Jesper had said he didn't want in, Herin would simply have shrugged and said he didn't have to. Not that Jesper resented Herin's attitude. He'd given Jesper 7 years of adventure in Dalriya since the end of the Isharite Wars. Sure, there had been times when Jesper had got homesick for Halvia. For home, that was only natural. In the far west of that continent, a place so few humans had ever been, amid the ice and the mountains, were his family. His brother, sister, and his father. He tried to imagine his life had he never left to see the world. He found he couldn't. Without Herin, Jesper would have done all right in Dalriya. He had the skills to get him a place in the household of plenty of lords. But he wouldn't have seen half as much, experienced only a fraction of what he had, the good and the bad, for he valued both. The world had changed in those 7 years. The Isharite Wars had been a struggle that had touched virtually every corner of the world. How else would he have got involved? But the world had shrunk since then. Men and women redrawing its boundaries, living smaller, pettier lives. Herin had stubbornly refused to join in with this direction, hence they were travelling to the greatest city in the world, to kill Gervase Salvinus. A day's hard ride northeast got them close to the border of Magnia, where Edgar's realm met Morbane to the north and the Midderstep to the east. As the 3 companions sat about their campfire, it was no surprise that their thoughts turned to the red-eyed boy in Morbane. Born at the close of the Isharite Wars, Jesper had seen too much not to believe it meant something. "When did you first use magic?" Herin asked Rimmon. "When I began to leave childhood. That is the most common age." "Soren and Belwyn could talk to one another when they were children," Herin said. "There is variation," Rimmon admitted. "And there are no signs?" Herin asked Jesper. "He seems a very ordinary boy to me," Jesper said. "Except for the eyes, of course." "Well, of course, except for the eyes," Herin said. "And Pentas said nothing that would help us?" Rimmon shook his head. "Nothing I recall. But then Pentas was one of those men who didn't expect to die. He probably gave little thought to what would happen if he did." Herin sighed, unsatisfied. "What of Essenberg? Does magic await us there?" "Yes. There is only one I know of. Inga, the witch." Inga was a name everyone knew, though Jesper had never met her, making it difficult to separate the truth from the rumors. She had been an apprentice to Gustav, Archmage of the Empire. Like Pentas and so many others, Gustav had not survived the Isharite Wars. "How much of a problem does she pose?" Herin asked. "That is a hard question to answer," said Rimmon. Herin sighed harder. "I would give anything for a straight answer." "As would I," said the mage irritably. "I have explained to you before. The world of magic is in flux. A great hole has been rent. It is not just the death of wizards, hundreds of Caladri and Isharites. The greatest spellcasters on both sides are Kindrix, Siavash, Nexodor, Ardashir, Agoston, Odon, Dorothea, Tibor, Ariok, Pentas, Gustav, Soren, all gone. In the space of a few years, that would have been enough in itself. But we witnessed the death of gods. It is an emptiness I can sense." Jesper and Herin shared a look. Like most people, what Rimmon thought of as a great tragedy didn't sound like one to them. Of course, Herin said what Jesper would have kept to himself. Maybe it's not such a bad thing if magic dies from the world. We're all safer without that kind of power. So you say, said Rimmon. But I have a fear that the truth is quite the opposite. Remember that Dis and the Isharites came here from another world. If some power were to arrive in Dalriya now, who is left to resist it? Jesper didn't like the sound of that. So to answer as best I can, Rimmon resumed, Inga was never a formidable magician, though probably a match for my own powers. But now, her magic may be just the same. Perhaps it has dwindled. Perhaps it has grown. We would do well to use caution. I'm glad we have you with us, said Jesper. Rimmon grunted an acknowledgement. Though I'd still prefer a world without sorcery. Next day they entered the Midderstep. Miles of grassland stretched before them. Somewhere out there were the Midian tribes and their livestock, forever on the move. There were no conventional borders between these tribes. It was thus down to luck who one might meet and where. Half a dozen Midian scouts approached them not long after midday, escorting them for a meeting with their chieftain. A long, winding column of mounted people and animals was heading south. To the border with the wilderness, said their chieftain, an affable man named Brock. Broad-shouldered, his skin was dark and healthy from spending all his days outdoors. Like all Midians, he wore his long black hair in a ponytail. Good grazing down there. You've come from Magnia? Aye, royal business, said Herin, offering a bag of coins. King Edgar is grateful for allowing us passage. Edgar's an honourable man, always done right by us. Brock inspected the coins, and a contented smile came to his face. On the path you're taking, you could be going to Koldeberg or Essenberg. Aye, said Herin, allowing himself a smile. We could be. Ha, it's like that, is it? Said the chieftain with a grin. Well, if it's Koldeberg, say hello to Farid and Walter for me. If it's Essenberg, take care. Brock gave them a parting gift of meat jerky. Jesper chewed on the strips as they continued their journey. It gave him some distraction from the monotony of the scenery. A pile of huge rocks, laying about as if deposited there by giants, was an interesting enough feature for them to choose to make their camp there. The idea made Jesper think of Oshin, king of the giants. He smiled fondly at his memories of him. What are you smiling about? Herin demanded as he stoked the fire. Remembering Oshin and Gunhild. Oh yeah, could do with their help on this mission, Herin suggested. They'd make short work of Salvinus. Jesper hadn't seen Oshin or Gunhild in the 7 years since they had returned to Halvia. News from that continent was scarce, but suggested they had won victories over the Drobaks there. He doubted it had been easy. The Drobaks had huge numbers and were now led by half-human, half-Drobaks creatures capable of speech and planning. One of them, Kull, had served as a lieutenant to Herin in the Isharite army. Jesper had liked him, seen his human intelligence, but the reputation of the Drobaks had cursed him. Everywhere they had gone in human lands, people had wanted him dead. In the end, he'd returned to the far north, establishing himself as a leader of the Drobaks. What news of Kull? Jesper asked Herin. Herin grimaced. Mixed. He believes they've exterminated every last surviving Isharite, which was always his main goal. And some achievement, added Rimmon. Herin nodded. But I fear strategically unwise. For now the Isharites are gone. The other northern powers would quite like the same to happen to Kull's Drobaks. He fears the Halaks most of all. Khan Gansuk has already taken Samir Durg. I advised Kull to find allies in the north, but the northern kings would be quite happy for the Halaks and Drobaks to keep one another occupied, Jesper suggested. Precisely. And what king is going to ask his people to fight in aid of the Drobaks? Asked Herin. None, of course, Jesper answered in his head. For most Dalrians, a world without drawbacks was as welcome as a world without magic. 2 days of comfortably paced travel got them to the city of Kolderberg in the Empire. The monotonous grassland of the Middersteppe had given way to well-organized farmland. Villagers out tending their communal fields of grain or their private gardens. The years of peace and prosperity could be seen in the capital of Borussia, in the contentment of its citizens and the abundance of its market. It spoke to the success of Borussia's ruler, Duke Walter, in restoring the duchy after the war. But despite Brock the Midian's request, they made no attempt to meet with the Duke or his advisor Farad. They had come into the Empire as assassins and kept a low profile, finding lodging in a quiet inn and retiring to their room after supper. The sun had only just appeared when they left for Essenberg, the well-maintained imperial road cutting through the countryside. Their progress was fast, and they didn't stop until they had entered Kelland. The traffic was busy now. Jesper watched from the side of the road. Carts and caravans passed by as he took his lunch, and their horses got a well-deserved rest. So many people, of all backgrounds and standing, drawn to the great capital. Capital only of Kelland now, he had to remind himself. Lindhafen in Thess was the new capital of the Empire of Brisingia, since Cohen had won election to the throne. But surely Essenberg was only sleeping, gathering its strength until its status was returned. Herin soon had them back in the saddle, pushing on for their destination. The first hints of orange and pink were in the sky above them when the walls of Essenberg finally came into view. The local farmers were leaving the city now, their produce sold and their wagons mostly empty. They glanced at Herin and Jesper at their swords in their belts, narrowed their eyes at Rimmon, trying to work out who or what he was. "We stand out as foreigners, even in these parts. I wonder if we are as low profile as I like to think." It was perhaps just as well Herin had come up with a decent story for their visit. Foreigners looking for honest employment in the ducal household, or looking for dishonest work from Salvinus. He was soon using it at the Kolderberg gate. Once inside, they took a roam at the nearest inn. They were quick to stable their horses and get moving. Herin led them straight for the northern half of the city, crossing Albert Bridge into the castle quarter. The information King Edgar had given them suggested that Gervase Salvinus was embedded in the ducal household, trusted by Hannelore, the mother of young Duke Leopold. If so, Essenberg Castle was the first place to look. "Most people connected with the regime live and work near the castle," Herin said. "Perhaps Salvinus has a house here. Even if he lives in the castle, he must have allies or retainers he meets with. Jesper, you hang around the castle square. Nothing to attract attention. Just watch. I'm gonna base myself over in the cathedral quarter, in case there's anything of interest going on there. Besides, I'm a little too well known for my own good in these parts. By Salvinus himself, for one. Rimmon, you, do whatever it is you do." A full day of riding meant that when he got to the square, the last thing Jesper wanted to do was sit on his arse. He paced around the opposite end from the castle, where the eagle of Kelland flew from the battlements, enjoying the evening sunshine. The square filled with more people, men and women, a pleasant spot to congregate after a day's work. The straight-walled castle, patrolled by guards, lent the area a feeling of safety too. A 5-piece band of minstrels began to play. Their leader bantered with the crowd and asked for requests. One of their number juggled one-handed whilst playing the shawm. Such a spectacle suited Jesper, helping to take attention away from him. It freed him to scan the people gathered about. Herin had described Salvinus's appearance, emphasizing a scar on the left side of his face from ear to chin. He'd also repeatedly said what an arrogant bastard the man was. It was enough for Jesper, who felt sure he would know him if he saw him. His hopes faded as the sun set. The minstrels played their last song and received the applause of their audience, along with a few coins. The people in the square dispersed. A man studied Jesper for a while, then approached. Thick-set, he had long hair and a Brasingian mustache. He had a war axe in his belt, a slightly unusual weapon, but his powerful shoulders suggested he could use it. "I don't know you," the man said with no preamble. "Came in today," Jesper replied. "Why?" "Looking for work," Jesper replied, tapping the scabbard of his sword. He knew he looked the part of a mercenary. After all, he was one. "Thought Essenberg might be the place to get it." Axeman looked him up and down. "You ain't from the Empire?" "Haskiny," Jesper offered, choosing a place far enough away that there was a good chance the man wouldn't know any better. "Haskiny? Thought there'd be plenty of work for a swordsman up there. What with the Hallaks and all?" Jesper shook his head. "The Hallaks are fighting the Drobaks. Haskiny's just watching. It's a 2-year war at least. King Corran figured he didn't need to pay for proper warriors for a good while. Tight bastard. Anyway, you reckon there's a chance here?" Axeman looked doubtful. "There's less war here than up north. Depends how good you are with that sword." "Pretty damn good. Even better with a bow." Axeman shook his head. "Lord Salvinus has crossbowmen on his payroll. Gordentines. Between you and me, they're greedy, lazy bastards. But their machines are deadly." "Salvinus. I'm getting somewhere." "Sword, then," Jesper persisted. "Maybe. If you can hang around here for a day or two, you might get lucky. Can't promise more than that." Jesper shrugged. "I've got nowhere else to go." He vacated the square then, making his way back to the inn on the west side of the city. It was dark when he arrived, and Herin and Rimmon were already there, waiting for him. He told them about his conversation with the broad-shouldered axeman. "It's a possible way in," Herin agreed. "Well done." "What about you?" Jesper asked. Herin made a face. "The public aren't allowed into Kolderberg Cathedral. Building work. They have guards posted outside. A little strange, if you ask me. I asked about Decker, the Archbishop of Kelland. I met him once, years back. Figured he might remember me. He was ancient then. Word is he's been ill and is recovering at his official residence outside the city. Couldn't get a straight answer about who's in charge in his absence." "What about you, Rimmon?" Jesper asked. The sorcerer looked worried. "There is a force here. Powerful. It reminds me of Calenth, when Dis came to destroy Madria." He shuddered at the memory. "It's being shielded, making it impossible for me to detect who or where it is." "Inga?" Jesper asked, recalling Rimmon saying that she was the only magic user he knew of in Essenberg. "It can't be," Rimmon said. "She can't have got this powerful." "If it's not the witch, where does that leave us?" Herin demanded. "I don't know," Rimmon admitted. Herin sighed irritably, pushing a hand through his hair. "Then we're all back to it tomorrow." There seemed no need for an early start, and so Jesper didn't rush himself the next day. Essenberg was already busy with morning activity when he left the inn. The market stall holders had already set out their wares, and the first food-laden carts were already trundling through the gates into the city. "And what are you up to this fine morning, Gervais Salvinus?" Jesper wondered. The chances were the bastard was inside Essenberg Castle, but trying to sneak their way in would be a high-risk tactic. It was filled with highly trained soldiers whose job was to defend the ducal family and their followers. Getting Salvinus alone and vulnerable had to be the path to success. Back in the square that faced the castle entrance, Jesper settled down for a prolonged stay. He sat down on a blanket, his scabbarded sword laid next to him, his back against a stone wall, and waited. "Once you stay still long enough," he told himself, "you blend into the background, unnoticed by those coming and going." With his eyes half closed, many would assume he was asleep, but he was on the lookout for a scar-faced mercenary general, or failing that, any other goings-on of note. Much of the morning passed by with precisely nothing of interest. Then the axeman from the previous evening returned. He seemed to spot Jesper and sauntered over. Jesper played on the idea that he might be asleep, and as the warrior got closer, he shut his eyes. A kick on the sole of his shoe made him flick them open. "Not interrupting anything, am I?" the axeman asked sarcastically. "Told you I had nowhere to go." "Well, you may be the luckiest bastard in Essenberg," said the man, glancing down at Jesper's weapon. "Assuming you can use that weapon as you claim." "I'm better than I claim," said Jesper. "Under promise and over deliver, that's my way." He held up a hand. The man shook it with a rueful smile, pulling Jesper to his feet. "Well, let's find out about that, shall we?" He began walking towards the castle. Jesper scooped up his sword and caught up with him. "You mean—" "Aye, Salvinus himself is waiting for you." "Maybe I am the luckiest bastard in Essenberg," Jesper told himself. He was meeting with Salvinus. A shiver ran up his spine. The only problem being he had no way of letting Herin and Rimmon know about it. "If I get the chance to strike, I shall have to take it," he told himself. The guards at the gatehouse stood aside to let them into the castle. Jesper followed the axeman under the raised portcullis, out into an open-air yard, and then into the castle proper. Beautifully designed, geometrically perfect, Essenberg Castle was an impressive home, but it bore little resemblance to the real fortresses of Dalriya, like Chalios. No wonder, Jesper thought, it had fallen so easily when Essenberg was taken by the Drawbacks. Axeman led him to a large reception room where half a dozen men stood about. One of them was talking while the others listened, and when Jesper focused on this individual, he noticed, with a start, a scar running from ear to chin. Salvinus. He had the confidence, or as Herin had preferred, arrogance, of one used to being in charge. Indeed, he seemed to be holding court in the Duke of Kellen's castle, the family of Emperor Baldwin themselves nowhere to be seen. In appearance, he had the physicality of a warrior, even if Jesper thought he detected the beginnings of a middle-aged spread. Salvinus looked up as they approached. "This is the Haskin, my lord," said the axeman. Shit, thought Jesper. He had forgotten he had said he was from Haskiny. Would Salvinus be able to spot the lie? Salvinus looked Jesper up and down. "Name?" he said at last. "Kettle," said Jesper, making a hasty decision to use his brother's name. "You haven't exactly prepared this well," he admonished himself, "but don't let yourself get flustered." "Deeds tells me you fancy yourself with that sword?" Salvinus asked. "Oh, that he does," said the axeman. Some chuckles followed these statements, and with them a palpable rise in tension. Without needing to be told, the warriors with Salvinus backed away, forming a rough circle. Salvinus drew his own sword, an exquisite-looking weapon with a long blade that looked to have a solid weight to it, but not so big as to be unwieldy. "Here we go," Jesper thought to himself. He drew his own blade and laid his scabbard on the floor. Could I kill him here and now? Should I? Make it look like an accident? Chances are I'd be struck down myself if I did. There's not much point in earning a small fortune if I'm too dead to spend it. Salvinus approached with a grin, eager to clash blades. He wafted it towards Jesper, tempting him to engage. When Jesper flicked his own sword at him, the mercenary captain moved quickly, withdrawing his sword, stepping to the side and rolling it back towards Jesper, all in one fluid motion. Jesper had been expecting something like it. He blocked Salvinus's stroke and then danced away, putting a safe distance between them in case there was more coming. They came together again, trading blows, testing one another out. Salvinus moved well, Jesper had to admit, and soon they were both perspiring and sucking air into their lungs. It didn't take so long for Jesper to learn how they compared. He was as strong as Salvinus, probably a little fitter, but less of a swordsman. Salvinus had moves that Jesper didn't, forcing him onto the defensive as Salvinus came at him from unexpected angles. He had to admit he'd fought few who were this man's equal. Herin was perhaps one. Salvinus came at him fast now, putting together a series of feints and strikes that Jesper struggled to counteract. His relaxed grin had transformed, and there was a savage, eager look in his eyes. For the first time, fear threatened to cloud Jesper's focus. There was nothing to stop Salvinus from killing him here and now. No repercussions for a favorite of the Emperor's widow slaying an unknown foreigner. Just as panic threatened, Salvinus took a step backwards. He stopped, pointing the tip of his blade to the floor. He bent over slightly, catching his breath, and his grin returned. "You're good," he said to Jesper. "Very good." His warriors applauded a good fight. "I could strike him now," Jesper told himself. He pictured slamming his blade point first through his enemy's chest. Salvinus raised an eyebrow, looking meaningfully at Jesper's blade, still raised. Jesper lowered it. "Not as good as you," he admitted. Alone with Salvinus now, Jesper walked up the winding stairs and along the corridors of Essenberg Castle. "Should this be the moment I kill him?" Jesper asked himself. He couldn't shake the thought that Herin would have done by now. But the odds of getting the job done here and now seemed even at best, while the odds of escaping afterwards were much lower. He was still hesitating when Salvinus knocked on a door. A female voice asked them to enter, and Jesper was alone with Salvinus no longer. Salvinus entered, and Jesper followed behind. It was a spacious room for a mere slip of a woman. A partitioned area contained a large bed and chests for personal effects. The other part was dominated by a work table. An odd collection of items were on it: lumps of metal, animal bones, glass phials containing liquids of different colors and consistency. The woman was watching him looking about her room, and Jesper felt a little embarrassed. "Who have you brought me, Salvinus?" she asked, looking Jesper up and down appreciatively. At that point, Jesper's brain caught up with who she must be. Inga, the witch. She looked so ordinary, flaxen-haired, slim-hipped, so girlish in appearance, that it had thrown him. "Kettle," said Salvinus. "You can get to know one another afterwards, I'm sure," he said, sounding faintly irritated. Inga looked from Jesper to Salvinus. "You intend to bring him with us?" "You told me not to bring my men," Salvinus said, sounding like a petulant child. "But I need some kind of backup." Inga laughed. It was a light tinkle, yet it grated on Jesper's ears. "What is Kettle going to do?" she asked, the question making Jesper feel so inadequate that he felt offended. "Make me feel better," said Salvinus. "Very well," she said, approaching them. She ran a hand along Jesper's shoulder and down his arm, squeezing his bicep. "He makes me feel better too. Maybe we could share him afterwards?" Jesper looked at her in shock, and he took an involuntary step backwards. Inga laughed. The sound made it feel like there was a buzzing insect trapped somewhere between Jesper's ears. "Where are we going?" Jesper asked, as they descended into the barrel-vaulted cellars of the castle. "And why do you need backup?" Going beneath the castle with Salvinus was almost the perfect opportunity. Too good to be true, though, since a witch of unknown power accompanied them. Salvinus, holding a smoking torch, pointed down a passageway. "This takes us to the crypt of the Dukes of Kelland. We've agreed to meet someone in there." "And we don't need backup," said Inga irritably. "We need to be respectful and deferential." She glanced at Jesper. "Most of all, discreet. Is that understood?" "I can do that," Jesper agreed mildly. He couldn't quite work out why they should be so tense. Who had the power to make a pair such as this uneasy? Surely not the wife or children of the late Emperor Baldwin. And who would ask to meet in a crypt? He was about to find out. They stopped at what appeared to be a dead end. Salvinus handed Jesper his torch, asking him to hold it high. The mercenary located a gap in the wall, into which he placed both hands. He strained with effort until suddenly a section of wall was rolling aside. Cold, humid air escaped, flickering the torchlight. "Keep it," Salvinus instructed him, and led them into the crypt. 4 rectangular sarcophagi lay along its walls, each one with a representation of the man who lay inside. Jesper put a hand to the newest. Duke Baldwin proudly held a shield before him, defender of the realm against the Isharites, the Drobaks, and a dragon. What would he think of this interruption to his slumber? A scraping noise ahead of them focused Jesper on the here and now. In the flickering shadows cast by his torch, it took him some time to process what he was seeing. A 5th coffin, this one wooden, was being manhandled into the central space of the crypt. At first he thought it was carried by 6 demons, the whites of their eyes all he could see of their faces. Then he realized they were 6 dark-skinned men who carefully placed their burden onto the floor of the crypt. Darker even than Chief Brock of the Midderstep. There was only one place in Dalriya they could be from, Avakaba, the land of the Lippers, a reclusive people with their own language. What, by the giants, are they doing here? And what is in the box? The 6 Lippers looked at the 3 of them with blank expressions. Salvinus cleared his throat as if he was about to say something, before Inga nudged him back into silence. Turning their attention back to their burden, the 6 men removed the lid. A wave of unseen energy escaped, entering the crypt. It surrounded them, prickling at the edge of Jesper's senses. The Lippers placed the coffin lid to the side. They then leaned in and lifted out the individual inside. As he rose to his feet, the energy in the crypt intensified. It seeped into Jesper's skin, echoed in his bowels. His teeth and tongue fizzed with it. His mind crackled. He recalled Rimmon's words from yesterday. It reminds me of Calenth, when Dis came to destroy Madria. Was this a god come to Dalriya? Jesper looked at Inga, fear etched on her face. She didn't want this visitor here, but he had come nonetheless. He stepped from his coffin and approached them. The power he emitted rippled around them, invisible waves shaking the crypt, causing dust to fall from the rough ceiling above. He had the looks of a Lipper, but his eyes burned with some ancient, cold fire. He studied them. Jesper avoided those eyes, had to stop himself from cringing and hiding behind Baldwin's sarcophagus. "What have I walked into?" Jesper demanded of himself. Meeting Salvinus alone, following him down here, he'd hardly acted with great care. He felt very vulnerable. Perhaps I deserve what I get. Now he understood why Inga didn't want Salvinus's men down here, why the need for discretion. But he began to ask himself why Salvinus and Inga had brought a stranger to this meeting. "Lord Zenikai," said Inga, "it is an honor to meet you." "It is good for allies to meet," said the man, his voice the sound of empty chasms and dry desert. "To get a measure of one another. Do you feel my power, Inga?" "I do." "As I feel yours. A trivial thing compared to mine. And yet Dalriya has become so emptied of magic that you have a chance to become important in the new order. Guide the Brisingians in the way I direct you, and your people will be allowed to survive and prosper. Disobedience from you, or anyone connected to your realm," he added, gesturing at Salvinus and Jesper. "And you will be punished, your people destroyed. No more warnings or second chances. Do we have a deal, Inga?" "I will do my utmost to manage the Empire as you desire," Inga said, no trace of her tinkling laughter now, simply utter submission. "In my exploration of Dalriya," Zenikai said, "I have identified not even a single individual who can challenge me, and so few with any magic powers at all. Yet now I come to Essenberg, and there are 2 such people in this very building." "2?" Inga demanded. "You, and one other. What other? She asked. She looked at Jesper with suspicion. Jesper held up his hands, expressing his innocence. He knew who it was, though. This sorcerer or god, or whatever he was, had detected Rimmon's presence. Lord Azenekai frowned, displeased. You don't even have control over what goes on in your city. There are no other sorcerers I know of in the Empire, let alone in Essenberg, said Inga. Are you sure they are not connected to you? You underestimate my powers. I can identify every source of magic, for each is unique. This is a magic user I have sensed before, possessing powers as limited as your own. They could not have tracked me here while I was inside my coffin, unless they were already in the city. But enough. It is of no matter. The other reason I came here was to demonstrate to you the means by which Dalriya will be subjugated. Azenekai gestured at the 6 figures before him. The Avakabi are now my instruments. Other peoples will follow in due course. Azenekai pointed a finger at Jesper, and he felt his blood run cold. This is the one you would have me turn. Jesper felt a knife at his throat. Sorry, old chap, he heard Salvinus say, but rather you than me. Jesper cursed himself for his foolishness. A part of him held out hope that Herin and Rimmon would come to the rescue. The realist in him knew there was no stopping the creature who approached him. He looked up at those cold eyes, and his heart hammered in his chest. His mouth went dry. What are you going to do? He heard himself asking in a calm voice. It was strange, as if another part of his mind had asked the question, while this one was screaming in terror. You will work for me now, Azenekai explained. Then the roof of the crypt caved in. Rock, dirt, and dust were everywhere, in Jesper's eyes, in his nostrils. He'd lost the torch. He was disoriented, but he heard a voice calling him, a familiar voice, and he knew this was his one slim chance of escape. He ran, virtually blind for the sound of Herin's voice. He banged into something, tripped and fell to the floor of the crypt. He wiped the dirt from his eyes and got back to his feet. There, he spied Herin, swinging his sword two-handed, sending one of the Avakabi coffin carriers to the floor. He ran for him. Herin looked up, saw him coming, then Herin's eyes widened. A force from behind sent Jesper crashing back to the floor. He lifted his head to see Herin's legs running towards him, past him. No, Herin. Shaky now, bereft of energy, Jesper forced himself up one more time. The clash of blades sounded behind him. I recognize you, he heard someone say. Salvinus. Fearing what he would see, Jesper made himself turn around. Herin and Salvinus were battling, blocking one another's vicious strikes. Behind them was Inga. She stared at Jesper, a look of fiery anger on her face. She held up a hand and a ball of magical energy appeared. Then, from behind her, another form appeared from the dust and the darkness. Azenekai, expressionless, his eyes cold and implacable. Herin had seen him too. Rimmon, he shouted, neck craning around. Get him out of here! The sound of running feet came from behind Jesper, and he turned to see Rimmon appear from the shadows. He raised a hand and deployed a magical shield just in time to protect himself from Inga's blast. The Haskin skidded to a halt beside Jesper and grabbed his arm. He had a wild look in his eyes and was murmuring to himself, perhaps working on another spell. A teleport, Jesper guessed. But what about Herin? Herin! He shouted. Herin knocked Salvinus's blade aside, turned and ran for them. Then he stopped mid-stride, held immobile. Azenekai strode towards him. Salvinus, following Herin, raised his blade to strike, but the sorcerer put up a hand and the mercenary's sword spun from his grasp. He is mine, said Azenekai. Jesper tried to move towards Herin, but Rimmon held him tight. No, 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 he shouted. Herin looked at him. They locked eyes for a moment. Then Jesper was moving, his vision swimming, his stomach churning. Suddenly he stopped. He was standing outside in the castle square, Rimmon beside him. "No!" he shouted, causing heads to turn. "We have to go back for him," he demanded of Rimmon, trying to keep his voice down. "And do what?" Rimmon snarled. "Defeat that thing? We've barely made it out." The sorcerer took a calming breath, the snarl leaving his face. "Herin got you out of there. You need to respect his sacrifice, and we need to leave Essenberg right now, with the knowledge of what we have witnessed." Rimmon shivered at the memory. "That creature needs to be stopped." Jesper couldn't do it. Azenekai had been about to cast some horrific magic on him. He knew it. Turn him into some kind of witless slave. And now he was going to just let that happen to Herin? He shook his head. "No." "Then do what you will," Rimmon said, his patience gone. "But getting ourselves killed does Herin no good. We need to get out of here." He paused, some sympathy returning to his features. "Maybe there will be a way to save him, but not here, and not now." With that, he turned away, hurrying for the western exit from the square. Jesper stood, trapped between the fast-disappearing sorcerer and Essenberg Castle, underneath which was a dreadful monster, a witch, and a mercenary they had come to kill. And they had his friend, his mentor of the past 7 years. Tears of rage and grief came to his eyes. He told his feet to follow Rimmon and leave Herin behind. They moved slowly, reluctantly at first, then got faster and faster. This has been The Sacrifice, a short story in the Chronicles of Dalriya, written by Jamie Edmundson, narrated by Aaron Smith. Copyright 2022 by Jamie Edmundson.